The greatest empires leave their most lasting messages in stone. A kingdom can vanish, its language forgotten, and its gods abandoned. Yet its grandest buildings often remain, standing silent for centuries. This presents a fascinating historical puzzle. Why do these monumental ruins so frequently survive the very civilizations that built them? The answer reveals a hidden battle between human ambition and the relentless passage of time. By the end of this exploration, you will understand the precise recipe that allows a crumbling wall to outlive the empire it once represented. We will see how forgotten choices about rock and mortar and simple twists of geography decide what endures. We will uncover why a jungle can preserve a temple better than a bustling city, and how a structure deemed useless becomes immortal. What forgotten monument from our own age might one day tell a story to the far future? The difference begins with a single, powerful intention. Monumental architecture is not simply large, it is a statement made permanent. It is defined by a combination of 4 distinct pillars that separate a temple or a palace from the homes that surrounded it. The first is scale. These structures were deliberately immense, designed to dominate the landscape and humble any individual standing before them. They were meant to be seen from a distance, to project power across valleys and plains. The second pillar is material. While the common people lived in houses of wood, brick, monuments rose from the earth in cut stone, fired brick, and concrete. Builders selected materials not for convenience but for endurance, choosing granite, marble, and limestone precisely for their ability to resist weather and wear for centuries. The third is purpose. An ordinary building provides shelter or workspace. Its function is practical. A monument's primary function is symbolic. It is built to honor a god, glorify a ruler, celebrate a victory, or embody an entire ideology in physical form. It is architecture as a permanent billboard. This leads directly to the fourth and final pillar, investment. Constructing on this scale required a staggering mobilization of resources. It meant commandeering the labor of thousands for years, diverting immense wealth, and focusing the technological ingenuity of an entire society on a single, non-essential project. A king might tax his people to the brink not to build a better aqueduct, but to carve his legacy into a mountainside. So from the very moment the first foundation stone was laid, these structures had a unique mission. They were not built just for the present inhabitants, but as a message in a bottle intended for the future. They were designed from the start to outlive their creators, to speak to generations who would know nothing of the empire's daily life, its conflicts, or even its name. This foundational ambition is the first and most crucial reason they so often succeed in doing exactly that. This fundamental ambition creates a profound mismatch in time. The civilization that builds a monument and the monument itself are living on 2 completely different clocks. One is the frantic, human clock of politics and power, ticking in years and decades. The other is the slow, patient clock of geology and climate, which measures time in centuries and millennia. A state, an empire, a kingdom, these are fragile human constructs. They can unravel with astonishing speed. A single lost battle can shatter an army's confidence. A failed harvest can spark famine and revolt. A weak heir or a bitter succession dispute can plunge a realm into civil war. An empire that seemed eternal on a map can dissolve within a generation, its laws forgotten, its currency worthless, its institutions abandoned. This is political decay, and it operates at the pace of human events. It is dramatic, often chaotic, and relatively swift. Now contrast that with the fate of a well-built stone pyramid or a granite temple wall. Its decay is not political but physical. And physical decay for something that massive is an achingly slow process. Wind and rain do not attack a stone block with the fury of an invading army. They work with infinite patience, wearing away perhaps a millimeter over a century. A crack forms from a freeze and thaw cycle, and over 200 years it might widen enough for a seed to take root. The root grows, and over another century it gently pushes two stones apart. This is the geological timescale. It is incremental, relentless, and almost imperceptible to any single human observer. So here is the critical disconnect. The empire falls in a historical blink, an event measured in years, but its grandest stone skeleton is only just beginning its long, slow journey into ruin. It will stand for centuries more, largely intact, as the forest reclaims the farmland around it, and new peoples settle nearby who have no memory of its builders. The civilization expires, but its stone message persists, simply because one clock stopped abruptly while the other has barely begun to tick. The clock of stone ticks so slowly because of a conscious, deliberate choice. A civilization facing its own mortality does not build its grandest dreams from wood and straw. It reaches for the bones of the earth itself. This drive for permanence led builders to become geologists, carefully selecting materials not for ease but for eternity. Granite, for instance, is a volcanic rock forged under immense heat and pressure. It is incredibly dense and hard, resisting both physical wear and chemical weathering from rain. An Egyptian obelisk carved from a single block of granite can stand exposed for millennia, its inscriptions still crisp because the stone itself is nearly as old as time. Limestone, while softer, offered other advantages. It could be quarried in massive, uniform blocks and carved with intricate detail. The Great Pyramids are a testament to limestone's workability and strength when stacked with precision. Then there is marble, prized for its luminous beauty and smooth finish. While it can be susceptible to acid rain in modern times, in the ancient world, a marble temple gleaming in the sun was the ultimate symbol of divine favor and civic pride. The material itself was the message, proclaiming wealth, stability, and a connection to the immortal. But perhaps the most revolutionary material choice came from the Romans, who mastered a recipe for concrete, what they called opus cementitium. This was no ordinary mix. Their secret was a volcanic ash called pozzolana, which, when combined with lime and rubble, created a paste that would not just harden, but actually strengthen over time, even underwater. This Roman concrete allowed them to build on an unprecedented scale, creating the vast dome of the Pantheon and harbors that still stand today. It was a technological leap driven by a desire for permanence. Similarly, cultures like the Inca of South America achieved incredible durability through design, using massive, irregularly shaped stones that were painstakingly shaped to interlock without any mortar. These polygonal walls fit together so perfectly that not even a knife blade can slide between them, allowing them to flex and settle during earthquakes without collapsing. In all these cases, the goal was the same: to defy entropy. Using common materials for common buildings makes perfect sense, but for a monument meant to carry a civilization's name into the unknown future, only the most durable substance would do. This selection process created a hidden shield. While the thatched roofs of villages rotted away in a few decades and wooden palaces succumbed to fire or termites, the stone core of a monument simply waited. The wind might smooth its carvings over centuries, and plants might find a foothold in its joints, but its fundamental structure remained, a skeleton patiently enduring long after the skin of daily life had vanished. This inherent resistance bought these structures the most valuable commodity of all, time, allowing them to survive the initial chaos of collapse and enter their long, slow twilight as ruins. Stone and concrete alone are not enough. The very shape of a monument is a secret weapon against time. This is where physics becomes an architect's greatest ally. The most enduring structures embrace a principle of overwhelming stability, often through sheer mass and intelligent distribution of weight. Think of a pyramid, the most iconic form of ancient monumental architecture. Its design is a masterpiece of simplicity and strength. Each stone block is held in place not by mortar, but by the immense weight of all the blocks above it pushing downward. The wide base spreads this colossal load over a vast area of ground, preventing subsidence, while the sloping sides channel forces inward and downward. It is a shape almost perfectly resistant to collapse, shrugging off earthquakes and storms that would topple a more delicate form. This reliance on compressive strength, a material's ability to bear weight without buckling, is fundamental. Dense stone and concrete excel under compression. They love to be squeezed. Monumental builders exploited this by creating massively thick load-bearing walls. A medieval castle keep or a Romanesque church isn't just made of stone. It is defined by walls so thick they become a geological feature themselves, a small mountain carved into a habitable space. These walls support not only their own weight but the heavy stone vaults and roofs above, creating a stable, unified mass. The engineering genius, however, often lay in doing more with less. The Roman arch is a perfect example. Unlike a simple post and lintel system, where a horizontal beam rests on two vertical supports, the arch is a continuous curve of wedge-shaped stones called voussoirs. The beauty of the arch is how it redirects force. The weight from above is transformed from a straight downward push into a lateral thrust, channeling the load outward along the curve of the arch and down into the heavy piers or walls on either side. This allowed the Romans to create vast, open interior spaces like those in the Colosseum or the Baths of Caracalla, spaces that would have been impossible with flat stone ceilings. The vault and the dome are simply extensions of the arch, creating soaring ceilings from this same resilient principle. Now, contrast this with the fate of a tall wooden tower or a palace built with a delicate timber frame. Wood is strong, but it is vulnerable in ways stone is not. A single fire can reduce it to ash in hours. Moisture invites rot and insects, silently eating away at its structural integrity from within. A key wooden support beam, if it fails, can trigger a catastrophic collapse of the entire section it holds up. A stone monument, by comparison, has a monolithic quality. It fails slowly, piece by piece. A corner might crumble, or a section of vault might give way after centuries of neglect, but the core mass often remains standing, a testament to the initial decision to build not just for beauty, but for brute physical endurance. The monument's form, therefore, is its first line of defense long after its builders are gone. Yet this resilient skeleton faces its first true test not during the empire's glory, but in the silence that follows its fall. The moment a state collapses, a vital lifeline is severed, the constant, quiet work of maintenance. For generations, teams of caretakers would have been as essential as the original architects. They were the unsung guardians against time, climbing scaffolds to clear leaf-choked gutters, mixing fresh mortar to repoint weathered joints, replacing cracked tiles on a temple roof, and cleaning the delicate channels that diverted rainwater away from foundations. This upkeep was a continuous, low-level investment, a small price paid to preserve a much larger one. Then, abruptly, the last caretaker leaves. The final repair is never made. The state treasury that funded the work is empty, its administrators gone. The specialized knowledge of which mortar mix to use, or how to safely shore up a leaning colonnade, fades from memory. The monument is now truly on its own, entering a dangerous new phase, the abandonment vacuum. The decay that follows is not slow geology, but a sudden acceleration. Water becomes the primary enemy. A single blocked drain on a vast roof is no longer a minor chore. It is a catastrophe in the making. the next storm sends a torrent cascading where it was never meant to go, seeping into cracks, pooling on delicate mosaic floors, and saturating masonry. This trapped moisture freezes in winter, expanding with incredible force, slowly but surely prizing stones apart from within. Without a roof at all, the interior is fully exposed and the process quickens. Simultaneously, life invades the cracks. A tiny seed carried by wind or bird settles into a damp, mortarless joint. It sprouts, and its tender roots begin their patient, destructive work, seeking moisture and minerals. Over years, those roots thicken into woody fingers that act like natural hydraulic jacks, exerting steady pressure until massive stone blocks are shifted out of alignment. Protective coatings fail. The brilliant white plaster or stucco that once sheathed rougher stone, shielding it from the elements and displaying vibrant frescoes, begins to blister and peel. Once it falls away, the softer stone beneath is vulnerable to wind-driven rain and scorching sun. This initial phase of dereliction is often the most dramatic visually. It transforms a maintained building into a recognizable ruin with gaping holes in its roof, vines cascading down its walls, and pools of water staining its floors. But here is the crucial insight: even as it becomes a picturesque shell, the monument's core fabric, that carefully chosen granite or that brilliantly engineered concrete, remains largely intact. The abandonment vacuum starts the clock on its transformation, but it does not spell immediate doom. The monument's inherent durability, baked into its materials and form, allows it to withstand this initial onslaught of neglect. It enters a long, slow negotiation with nature, a process measured not in years, but in centuries, where it slowly surrenders its details but stubbornly clings to its fundamental shape. But this negotiation with nature is only half the story. A ruin must also survive its encounters with people who come after. Here, a strange economic truth emerges. The very thing that made a monument grand is what often saves it from being torn apart. In the chaotic years following a collapse, scavengers arrive quickly. They are pragmatic, seeking immediate value. The lead that sealed a temple roof, the bronze clamps that held stone blocks together, the gilded statues, the iron gates, all of these are precious, reusable materials. They are stripped away with efficient speed, leaving the stone skeleton bare. Yet then, the scavengers often stop. They leave the mountain of stone itself largely untouched. Why? Because on a practical level, a monumental ruin is often worthless. Its primary material, while durable, is an economic nightmare to repurpose. Think of the logistics. A single stone block from a pyramid or a Mayan temple platform can weigh several tons. Moving it requires an enormous coordinated effort, teams of oxen, complex sledges, and cleared roads, the same kind of state-level organization that built it in the first place. For a small, post-collapse community just trying to survive, the cost in labor and time is simply too high. There are easier sources of building material closer to home. Furthermore, the stone is not in a convenient form. It is carved into specific, often enormous shapes meant to fit one unique structure. To reuse it, you would have to painstakingly recut it, a difficult task when freshly quarried stone is available. The monument becomes a geological curiosity, too much trouble to dismantle. This is not to say it never happened. There are famous examples of systematic reuse, like the medieval plundering of Roman structures. But look closely at that pattern, and it proves the rule. Builders in the Middle Ages did not typically attack remote, gigantic complexes like the Colosseum in Rome to haul its stone across the countryside. Instead, they targeted more accessible, manageable sites, like the Roman walls surrounding their own towns, or nearby aqueducts that provided neatly squared blocks already close to where new churches or castles were being built. It was a matter of convenience and economy. A remote jungle temple, a wind-swept hill fort, a pyramid in the desert. these were often left alone precisely because they were inconvenient. They offered no economic incentive for destruction. Their stone had more value standing as a mysterious landmark than it did as a quarry, so the ruin gains a paradoxical protection. Its own monumental scale and difficult location, once symbols of power, become a shield. It is saved by its impracticality. People might camp in its shadow or carve new symbols on its walls, but they lack the means or the motive to reduce it to rubble. It stands not because it is revered, but because it is, in a very real sense, too much work to bother with. This economic indifference grants it another crucial lease on life, allowing the slow, geological clock to keep ticking undisturbed. This strange state of being both useless and too massive to remove creates a curious opportunity, a second life. A monument does not have to be frozen in its original purpose to survive. In fact, the opposite is often true. Its greatest chance at longevity comes from being useful to the people who come after, even if in a completely different way. This is the journey from sacred to secular, a transformation where a structure's meaning is rewritten by new hands. Imagine a grand pagan temple, its columns raised to honor a forgotten god. When a new faith rises, it faces a choice: tear down this symbol of the old ways or claim it. Frequently, they chose to claim it. The physical shell was too impressive, too solid to waste. So the statues of the old gods were removed, the interior was reconsecrated, and the temple became a church. The Parthenon in Athens is a famous example, transforming from a temple to Athena, to a Christian church dedicated to the Virgin Mary, and later a mosque. Each conversion required maintenance. Each new faith patched the roof and repaired the walls to serve their own community, thereby preserving the essential stone fabric for another millennium. This adaptive reuse is a powerful preservation force. A crumbling Roman fortress wall might not house soldiers anymore, but its sheer, defensible bulk makes it the perfect foundation for a medieval town, its stones becoming the back wall of a row of houses. An imperial palace, stripped of its finery, might have its vast halls subdivided into workshops or its courtyards turned into a public market square, becoming the bustling heart of a new settlement. Even becoming a quarry, as we discussed, is a form of reuse, though a destructive one. The key insight is that continued use, any use, means continued care. Someone has a reason to clear the drains, to shore up a leaning wall, to keep the interior dry. This ongoing human engagement fights the abandonment vacuum. It stabilizes the structure at a crucial point, preventing the rapid decay that sets in when a building is utterly forsaken. Now, consider the fate of a monument that fails to find this new purpose. A remote royal tomb, sealed and hidden, might be forgotten entirely. A ceremonial platform in a valley that floods might be abandoned and never resettled. These places lose all function and, critically, all meaning to the generations that follow. Without a story, without a use, they become invisible, just another hill or pile of stones. They are far more likely to be completely dismantled for local building projects, or simply left to be swallowed by the forest until they are rediscovered centuries later as archaeological mysteries. The most resilient ruins, then, are often those that manage to stay relevant. They performed a service, whether spiritual, practical, or even just as a landmark, for people who knew nothing of their original builders. This continuous thread of utility, however changed, provided the intermittent repairs and the social will to keep them standing. Their stone endured not just because of its physical properties, but because it remained woven into the human story, finding a new role long after its first act had ended. Geography can be a silent guardian, a force more powerful than any army in deciding a ruin's fate. While a structure's design and materials determine how it decays, its location determines if it will be disturbed at all. Many of the most spectacular surviving monuments were not built for convenience. They were placed deliberately in remote, defensible, or spiritually charged landscapes. A mountaintop citadel, a temple on a desert island, a ceremonial center deep in a trackless jungle. These were statements of power and piety, accessible only to the elite or the devoted. Yet when the civilization that built them receded, that very remoteness became its greatest protection. These sites became economically irrelevant. They were not sitting on prime farmland a new community would want to clear. They were not blocking a river ford needed for trade. They were not occupying the flat, fertile valley where a new town would naturally spring up. Instead, they were perched on cliffs, hidden in canyons, or surrounded by swamps, places later peoples had little practical reason to visit, let alone dismantle stone by backbreaking stone. This isolation created a natural buffer against the most destructive force of all, constant human activity. Think of the difference between a Roman villa in the countryside and a Roman forum in the heart of a city. The villa, abandoned, might have its stones hauled away over generations to build nearby farmhouses and barns until nothing remained but a faint outline in the soil. The forum, however, sat directly beneath what would become a medieval and then a modern European city. It faced constant pressure, its foundations cut through for sewers and cellars, its columns buried under new streets, its very memory overwritten by centuries of construction. Survival there was a frantic, piecemeal struggle. Now consider a place like Machu Picchu, the Inca citadel in the Peruvian Andes. Its breathtaking location on a narrow ridge between two peaks was chosen for spiritual reasons and for defense. When the Inca Empire fell, the site was simply abandoned. The steep, treacherous trails leading to it grew over. The cloud forest crept back in, covering its terraces and temples in a protective blanket of vegetation. It was not rediscovered by the outside world for nearly 400 years. During all that time, it was shielded not by its strength, but by its inconvenience. No farmer needed that inaccessible ridge. No builder would attempt to haul its granite blocks down the mountain. Its remoteness granted it the ultimate gift, obscurity. It slept, quietly decaying at geology's pace, until it could be found again as a monument rather than a quarry. The same principle applies to the cliff dwellings of the American Southwest, built into high, sheer canyon walls for protection. When the communities moved on, these dwellings were simply too difficult to reach and too risky to occupy without the social knowledge that built them. They were left as silent puzzles in the rock, or consider the ancient city of Petra, hidden in a deep desert canyon in Jordan. Its spectacular tombs carved directly into the rose-red sandstone cliffs were protected by the harsh, waterless landscape surrounding it. The nomadic peoples who passed through had no use for its monumental facades. They needed grazing land and oases, not a stone city in a narrow gorge. So it too was largely left alone by major settlement, preserving its carved beauty for centuries. This geographic lottery is a final, crucial layer. A monument built with durable materials in a stable form might still be lost if it sits on valuable real estate. But place that same structure in a location that later generations find too remote, too difficult, or simply not useful, and it buys itself centuries of uninterrupted peace. The jungle reclaims it, the sand drifts against its walls, but its core remains, waiting in the landscape for its story to be heard once more. This long, slow negotiation between the built world and the natural one is where the ruin finds its final, enduring form. Nature is not a vandal, it is a patient sculptor, working over centuries with tools of water, root, and temperature. Its primary method is the freeze-thaw cycle, a deceptively simple process with immense power. Rainwater seeps into the tiniest hairline crack in a stone or a mortar joint. When night falls and the temperature drops, that trapped water freezes. But water expands when it turns to ice, pushing outward with tremendous force, widening the crack just a fraction of a millimeter. The next day, the ice melts. More water flows in and the cycle repeats, season after season, century after century. This gentle, relentless pressure acts like a wedge, slowly but surely prying even the most tightly fitted stones apart. It is a force that defeated empires working in absolute silence. Alongside this, biological forces take root. A bird drops a seed into a newly formed crevice damp with dew. A tiny sapling sprouts, its tender roots seeking moisture. As the plant grows, those roots thicken and harden, threading their way deeper into the masonry. They do not attack the stone with malice, they simply grow, and in growing, they exert a steady, lateral pressure that can gradually displace blocks weighing tons. Ivy and other climbing plants, while seemingly gentle, can be particularly destructive. Their adhesive holdfasts grip onto surface details, trapping moisture against the stone and accelerating decay, while their network of stems and leaves can eventually pull loose sections of carving or facing stone away from the wall behind it. Then there are the sudden, violent interventions. Seismic activity, the shifting of the earth itself, does not discriminate between an ancient temple and a natural rock formation. An earthquake can deliver a catastrophic blow in seconds, toppling columns that have stood for 1,000 years. Yet even here, the monument's original design fights back. Those interlocking Inca walls without mortar are engineered to dance, to settle and shift during a tremor without collapsing. A pyramid's low, wide profile offers incredible stability. So while an earthquake might shatter a delicate upper story, it often leaves the foundational mass stubbornly intact. This is the key to understanding the ruin we see today. Nature wins, but it wins selectively. It is not a total demolition. A forest growing through a Roman forum may topple the columns of a basilica, but the heavy, continuous foundation wall, the stylobate, will likely remain, outlining the ghost of the building's footprint. Ivy may crumble the medieval mortar binding a castle wall, but the large, durable stone blocks themselves will simply tumble into a pile at the wall's base, a cairn of their former selves. This selective dismantling is what creates the aesthetic we so deeply associate with ancient ruins. The broken arcade against the sky, the lone column standing sentinel in a field, the staircase leading nowhere. It is a snapshot of a process paused, not completed. The monument's inherent strength, born from those original choices of material and form, dictates the terms of its surrender. It does not vanish, it transforms piece by piece into a new kind of landmark, one where human geometry and natural entropy meet in a poignant, enduring balance. No civilization demonstrates this monumental endurance more clearly than the Roman Empire. Its ruins are not just relics, they are active participants in the modern world, and their survival is a masterclass in every principle we have discussed. Take the Colosseum in Rome. Its survival is a story of brutal pragmatism and evolving purpose. After the fall of the Western Roman Empire, the great amphitheater was not lovingly preserved as a museum, it was repurposed. Its massive underground chambers, once filled with gladiators and animals, were sealed and forgotten. The colossal stone skeleton above ground, however, was too valuable to ignore. It became a fortified village, a castle for a medieval noble family who built their homes right into its arcades. Later, it was used as a quarry, but here its scale worked in its favor. While its iron clamps were pried out and its travertine marble facade was stripped to build palaces and churches across Rome, the task of completely dismantling such a gigantic structure of concrete and brick was simply too immense. The core remained a hollowed-out testament to its own indestructible design. That core was built with Roman concrete, a material so advanced we are still unraveling its secrets today. Its use of volcanic ash created a paste that not only hardened but grew stronger underwater and resisted cracks for centuries. This technological choice, made 2,000 years ago, is the primary reason we can still walk its corridors today. The aqueducts tell a similar story of engineered immortality. These soaring arches of stone and concrete were the lifelines of the empire. When centralized maintenance ceased, many fell into disrepair, their channels clogged. But their physical form was so sound, so perfectly engineered to carry immense weight across valleys, that they could not be easily removed. In some places, they were reused as the foundations for medieval fortifications or simply stood as permanent landmarks, their arches framing the countryside for generations who no longer understood their original function. They became part of the natural scenery, a normalized feature of the landscape. This normalization is a powerful force. Hadrian's Wall, stretching across the north of England, offers a perfect example. Built as a stark military boundary, it was abandoned by the Roman army in the early 5th century. For the kingdoms that followed, the wall was not a sacred monument, it was just there, a long, linear source of pre-cut stone. It was systematically quarried for centuries to build local churches, farmhouses, and castles. Yet, because it was over 70 miles long, this scavenging could never be complete. In remote, wind-swept sections where the stone was less convenient to haul away, the wall remained. It slowly became part of the cultural and physical geography, a reference point for boundaries, a place of legend, and eventually a protected historical treasure. Its survival in segments is a direct result of its monumental scale and its integration into the practical lives of successor societies. The Roman example teaches us that survival is rarely about static preservation. It is a dynamic process of adaptation. A temple becomes a church, an amphitheater becomes a fortress, an aqueduct becomes a bridge, and a wall becomes a quarry, and then a hiking trail. Each new use, even a destructive one, represents a negotiation. The structure gives up some of its original fabric or purpose, but in return, it gains a continued relevance that fights total oblivion. The most resilient Roman ruins are those that never stopped being useful in some way, that managed to weave themselves into the fabric of every new era that followed, ensuring their stone bones would outlive not just Rome, but the many worlds that came after it. The Roman path to survival was one of constant adaptation, but another ancient civilization chose a different, even more profound form of endurance. Deep in the rainforests of Central America, the great Maya city-states like Tikal, Palenque, and Calakmul tell a story of monumental architecture meeting a monumental force of nature. While Rome's ruins were slowly absorbed into new cities, the Mayas were surrendered to the jungle itself. Their collapse was not a single event but a gradual process of dispersal, beginning over 1,000 years ago. By the time European explorers arrived, these vast ceremonial centers had been empty for centuries, their stone hearts completely enveloped by a living, green blanket. This created a survival scenario radically different from the Mediterranean world. The Maya built their temples and palaces from the most abundant material they had, limestone. This sedimentary rock, while workable, is softer than granite or Roman concrete. Left exposed to the torrential rains and humidity of the tropics, it would weather and dissolve relatively quickly. Yet, these limestone pyramids did not dissolve. They survived because of a profound paradox. The very jungle that seemed to be destroying them became their most effective guardian. When a Maya city was abandoned, the process was slow but total. The sustaining population that maintained the plazas, cleared the encroaching vegetation, and repaired the stucco facade simply drifted away, likely due to a complex mix of drought, resource strain, and social change. The last caretaker left, and the forest did not wait. Seeds sprouted in the cracks of the grand staircases, roots slithered over elaborately carved stelae. The dense canopy closed overhead, shading the white stone buildings in perpetual twilight. This rapid overgrowth was not a catastrophe for the structures, it was a form of preservation. The thick mat of roots and vines that covered the buildings acted like a protective sheath. It shielded the limestone from the direct, erosive force of tropical downpours. The canopy broke the fall of rain, and the root network held the soil in place, preventing the rapid runoff that could have undercut foundations. The jungle created a stable, humid microclimate that reduced the damaging cycles of extreme heating and cooling. In effect, the monuments were put into a natural stasis, mummified by greenery. Their remote locations, often far from the coasts or major rivers that would attract later colonial settlement, added another layer of protection. For generations, these sites existed only in local legend, places of spirits and ancestors, too deep in the wilderness for systematic looting or dismantling. The jungle made them economically invisible and physically inaccessible. So while the intricate stucco sculptures on their exteriors might have been worn away, the core limestone construction, the massive rubble-filled platforms and pyramids endured. They became not ruins in an open landscape, but secrets held by the earth. A Maya temple did not slowly crumble into a picturesque silhouette against the sky. It disappeared, becoming a hill cloaked in trees, its true shape hidden until archaeologists carefully peeled back the layers of time and vegetation. This is a testament to a different kind of dialogue between human ambition and the planet. Where Roman ruins survived through continuous human reuse, Maya ruins achieved immortality through profound and complete abandonment, finding their guardian in the relentless, life-giving force they had once cleared away to build their cities. The jungle's guardianship is not unique to the Maya. In Southeast Asia, the Khmer Empire crafted a civilization so intertwined with its environment that its monuments were shaped by water as much as by faith. At the heart of this legacy lies Angkor Wat, a structure that embodies a different path to immortality, one built not just on stone but on a deliberate, engineered landscape. The Khmer rulers did not simply build temples, they sculpted an entire hydraulic kingdom. Vast artificial lakes called barre and an immense network of canals controlled the monsoon's flood and drought, turning the land into a fertile engine that supported a population of perhaps 1 million people at its height. Angkor Wat itself is encircled by a colossal moat over 5 kilometers long. This was not merely decorative or defensive, it was a stroke of geological genius. The moat acted as a giant hydraulic stabilizer, maintaining a consistent water table in the sandy, unstable soil. By keeping the ground perpetually damp, it prevented the massive stone foundations from shifting and cracking during the dry season, essentially floating the temple on a man-made aquifer. This understanding of water and earth is why, after centuries of abandonment, the central towers still stand with such defiant symmetry. When the Khmer Empire began to fade, pressured by shifting trade routes and neighboring states, the intricate water management system fell into disrepair. The canals silted up, the reservoirs filled with mud, and the jungle began its slow march back. Yet the monuments, particularly Angkor Wat, faced a different fate from total obscurity. A critical cultural shift occurred. The empire's state religion evolved from a form of Hinduism and Mahayana Buddhism to Theravada Buddhism, the predominant faith of the region today. This was not a violent replacement but a gradual transformation. Importantly, Theravada Buddhism found a sacred home in the very stones of Angkor. Monks continued to inhabit and care for the temple complex, reinterpreting its magnificent bas-reliefs not as tales of Hindu gods, but as illustrations of Buddhist cosmology and the life of the Buddha. The site never lost its sanctity, it simply saw its spiritual narrative expand. This continuous religious reverence was a powerful shield. It meant Angkor was never viewed as a relic of a defeated enemy or a pagan curse to be eradicated. It was and remained a holy place. There was no campaign of deliberate iconoclasm, no systematic effort to topple its towers because they represented a discredited past. Instead, the monks and local communities became its gentle custodians, even as the forest encroached. The jungle's embrace here was a double-edged sword. Towering silk cotton and strangler fig trees sent roots cascading over gallery walls, their slow, powerful growth displacing stones and crumbling corridors. In one sense, the vegetation was an agent of destruction, yet in another, it performed the same protective role seen in the Maya world. The dense canopy sheltered the delicate sandstone carvings from the worst of the sun and torrential rain, while the root systems bound the structures together, holding them in a precarious but preserving grip for centuries. The temple became a part of the forest ecosystem, a mystical ruin where the sound of chanting monks mixed with the calls of gibbons. This balance between nature's persistence and enduring human reverence created a perfect storm for survival. Angkor slept, but it was never truly forgotten. It existed in a state of layered meaning, a geological fact, a spiritual anchor, and a living legend all at once. When French explorers and archaeologists began systematic study and clearing in the 19th century, they did not discover a lost city. They encountered a site that had been continuously known, yet profoundly transformed by time. They found a monument that had successfully navigated the collapse of its builders by finding a new, enduring purpose in the faith of those who came after, all while being held in the steadfast, green arms of the earth it was designed to master. But a ruin's story does not end when the last caretaker leaves. It enters a new chapter written not by its builders, but by those who find it. When a new people encounters the colossal, weathered stones of a forgotten civilization, they face a mystery. Who could have built such a thing? The logical answer that it was ordinary humans like themselves is often the last one considered. Instead, the human imagination rushes in to fill the silence with a grander, more mythical narrative. Across medieval Europe, the broken aqueducts and tumbled walls of the Roman Empire were not seen as the work of a historical predecessor. They were the deeds of giants or a lost race of superhuman heroes. These stories were not just fanciful tales, they served a crucial purpose for the new kingdoms taking root amid the old stones. By attributing the ruins to a mythical, non-human past, the new rulers could sidestep a troubling historical truth. It meant they did not have to admit they were living in the shadow of a civilization that had surpassed them in engineering, organization, and scale. The narrative of giants created a clean break, placing the awesome ruins safely in the realm of legend, not in a recent past that might invite unfavorable comparison. This symbolic reinterpretation became a powerful, if unintended, preservation force. A structure believed to be the work of giants or gods often gained a protected, almost taboo status. To dismantle it might be seen as inviting bad luck or disrespecting powerful, ancient forces. The ruin was no longer just a pile of useful stone. It was a monument to a supernatural history, and that made it sacred in a new way. We see this pattern globally. In Sri Lanka, the vast, complex irrigation tanks and palaces of the ancient Sinhalese kingdoms were later attributed by local folklore to a mythical king, Mahesna, or to the work of demons. In the Andes, local communities often spoke of Inca sites as the work of the Nyapa Machu, the ancient ones or supernatural beings, long before archaeologists arrived. These narratives are not mistakes, they are tools for making sense of a past that feels too immense to belong to ordinary human history. This process of myth-making often extends directly into politics. A new ruler seeking to legitimize their power might deliberately link themselves to the ruin. They could claim descent from the legendary builders, or assert that their right to rule was prophesied in the ancient stones. By physically incorporating the ruin into their own capital, or using its materials in their palace, they were visually stitching their new regime into a timeline of apparent greatness. The ruins became a backdrop for coronations, a setting for new ceremonies, a tangible bridge to a glorified past that lent authority to the present. This symbolic value is a subtle but potent shield. When a ruin is woven into the founding myths and identity of a new culture, its destruction becomes an attack on that culture's own story. It transitions from being a foreign relic to being an ancestral heritage, regardless of the actual biological or cultural lineage. The stones are granted a reprieve because they have been given a new meaning, a new role in the ongoing human drama. They survive not only through their physical strength, but through the strength of the stories we tell about them. A ruin, therefore, is never truly empty. It is a vessel waiting to be filled with new meaning by every generation that encounters it. And in that act of storytelling, people often find the best reason of all to leave it standing. For centuries, a ruin's survival was a matter of luck, a quiet negotiation with nature and the indifference of later peoples. But a profound shift began a few hundred years ago, one that would change the very definition of what a ruin was for. This was the dawn of modern archaeology, a transition from seeing ancient sites as sources of treasure to understanding them as pages in a global story. Before this shift, the encounter with a lost city was often a financial venture. Explorers, adventurers, and agents for wealthy collectors would arrive at a site with one primary goal: to extract its most beautiful and portable objects. Statues were hacked from temple walls, gold ornaments were melted down, and intricately painted pottery was crated up and shipped across oceans to fill private cabinets of curiosity. This was treasure hunting, and while it sometimes brought spectacular artifacts to light, its method was essentially destructive. Context was meaningless. The precise layer of soil an object was found in, its relationship to the building foundation next to it, the tiny seeds or tools found alongside it, all of this evidence was discarded as rubbish in the frantic search for a saleable prize. A site was treated like a panotta, broken open for the shiny treats inside, while the shell itself, the structure and the story it held in its very arrangement, was left damaged and incomprehensible. The ruin survived the collapse of its civilization, only to be ransacked by those claiming to be its admirers. This approach began to change in the 18th and 19th centuries, driven by a new spirit of scientific inquiry and national identity. Scholars started to ask different questions. Instead of just what is beautiful and valuable, they asked who built this, how did they live, and what can this teach us about human history? This new question required a new method: systematic excavation. Archaeologists began to work slowly, layer by layer, mapping every find, noting its depth and position, and preserving even the most mundane items: a broken clay pot, a worn-out tool, animal bones from a meal. These fragments, worthless to a treasure hunter, became priceless clues. They revealed diet, trade routes, technology, and daily life. This meticulous process transformed a ruin from a quarry of artifacts into a three-dimensional historical document. With this new understanding came a new responsibility: conservation. If a site was a book, then its pages were crumbling. Excavation, by removing the protective cover of earth, often accelerated decay. So the field developed techniques to actively stabilize what was uncovered. Crumbling walls were carefully repointed with compatible mortar. Sagging lintels were supported with discrete steel braces. Drainage systems were installed to divert groundwater away from fragile foundations. The goal was no longer just to discover, but to preserve the discovery for future study and public understanding. This marked a fundamental turning point in the life of a ruin. For millennia, its trajectory had been one of gradual, inevitable surrender to natural forces. Now, human intervention began to actively slow that clock, not for immediate gain, but for legacy. A temple platform was no longer left to be split apart by tree roots. It was cleared, studied, and maintained. This shift from plunder to preservation meant that the final chapter of a monument's long life was no longer left solely to chance. Its survival became a conscious choice, a gift from the present to the future, ensuring that the silent stones would have a chance to speak their full story for generations to come. This conscious choice to preserve has now become a global enterprise, driven by a force more powerful than any ancient king: tourism. In the 20th and 21st centuries, a ruin's value has been utterly redefined. Its worth is no longer in the reusable stone or the symbolic power it lends a new ruler, but in its ability to draw visitors from across the planet. A crumbling temple is no longer just a historical document, it is an economic asset. This transformation has created the most powerful and systematic preservation incentive in human history. Where once a local community might see an ancient amphitheater as a convenient quarry, a national government now sees a potential source of foreign currency, job creation, and international prestige. The entire calculation changes. Suddenly, there is a direct financial reason to clear the invasive roots, to reinforce the leaning walls, and to build a road so that buses can arrive. This economic imperative has given birth to the modern heritage industry. Sites are no longer simply excavated and left to the elements, they are actively managed. Visitor centers are constructed to interpret the history. Walking paths are laid to guide the flow of crowds and protect fragile archaeology, and meticulous conservation teams work in the background, using advanced technologies like three-dimensional scanning and humidity monitors to slow decay. The process of ruination, once left to nature's timeline, is now carefully curated. In some cases, this goes beyond preservation to full-scale reconstruction. A debate as old as modern archaeology asks, should we stabilize a ruin as we found it, or rebuild it to show its former glory? The tourist gaze often favors the latter. Seeing a complete building is more visually satisfying and easier to understand than interpreting a foundation. This has led to ambitious projects, like the meticulous rebuilding of the Roman theatre in Orange, France, or the reconstruction of entire sections of the Great Wall of China. These efforts are not just about history, they are about creating a compelling, photogenic destination. The ultimate recognition of this new global value is the United Nations Educational, Scientific and Cultural Organization World Heritage List. A designation as a World Heritage Site is not merely an honorary title, it is a powerful branding tool. It signals to travelers worldwide that a location is of outstanding universal value, placing it on a must-see map. This status can unlock international funding and expertise for conservation, but it also comes with a responsibility to manage the site sustainably against the new threat it now faces, the wear and tear of millions of footsteps. This is the ironic modern chapter in a ruin's life. Having survived collapse, abandonment, and plunder, it now faces a new kind of pressure: love. The very admiration that saves it can also harm it. The breath of thousands of visitors can raise humidity levels inside a tomb, damaging paintings. Constant foot traffic erodes ancient floors. The demand for infrastructure, hotels, and amenities can strain the local environment. Preservation today is a constant balancing act between access and protection, between sharing a wonder and safeguarding it for the future. The ruin, once a silent witness to the end of one world, has become a bustling crossroads for our interconnected one, its survival now guaranteed not by obscurity, but by its starring role in the story we all want to experience. Yet for all their resilience, not every grand structure wins this battle with time. To understand why some monuments stand for millennia, we must also face the stark reality of those that vanish. Their absence teaches us just as much as the surviving stones. The most fragile were often built from the very earth upon which they stood. In ancient Mesopotamia, the cradle of civilization, the great ziggurats were not pyramids of stone, but mountains of sun-dried mud brick. These towering temples, reaching toward the gods, were architectural marvels of their time, but their primary material was vulnerable. A mud brick structure requires constant maintenance. A season of unusually heavy rain could melt its facades into shapeless mounds. If a society faltered and the regular ritual of replastering and repair stopped, the ziggurat would begin its swift return to the earth from which it was formed. Without a protective stone skin or a remote location, these colossal platforms simply eroded, leaving behind only vast, telltale hills that archaeologists recognize as the ghosts of cities. Their message was written in sand, not for the ages but for their own generation. Another path to disappearance came from being too useful, too accessible. While we discussed how the Colosseum's scale saved it, countless other Roman buildings met the opposite fate. In cities that remained continuously inhabited, like London or Paris, Roman structures were not mysterious giants' work, they were convenient lumber yards and quarries. The massive stone blocks of a forgotten forum became the foundations for a Norman cathedral. The finely cut marble of a temple was burned to make lime for mortar. This systematic recycling was not vandalism, it was pragmatism. Why quarry new stone miles away when a perfectly good, pre-cut supply sits in the crumbling walls of the old city center? In these places, the Roman layer was not preserved, it was consumed, digested by the growing medieval and modern metropolis above it. The monument survived only in fragments, repurposed and hidden within newer walls. Then there is the deliberate, targeted erasure. Across history, conquerors and new regimes have sought to rewrite the past by physically destroying its symbols. The Buddhas of Bamiyan, the two colossal statues carved into a cliff face in Afghanistan, stood for 1,500 years. They survived the rise and fall of empires, not through obscurity, but through a shifting cultural reverence that saw them adopted and respected by different faiths over centuries. Their end came not from natural decay, but from a deliberate modern act of ideological destruction. In 2001, they were demolished with explosives. This was a stark reminder that a monument's greatest threat is not time or weather, but the human will to annihilate memory. Finally, the environment itself can be an insurmountable foe. Some landscapes are simply too volatile. A magnificent palace built on an active fault line may not survive the next major earthquake. A coastal temple constructed on soft, eroding cliffs may tumble into the sea within a few centuries of abandonment. A structure in a river's floodplain might be buried under meters of silt, preserved but utterly lost to view, or scoured away by changing river channels. In these cases, the geological clock ticks not in centuries, but in catastrophic moments. The monument's own location, perhaps chosen for spiritual or strategic reasons, contains the seed of its eventual destruction. These stories of loss are not failures, they are the other half of the equation. They highlight, by contrast, the incredible convergence of factors required for survival. The enduring ruin is a rare winner of a historical lottery, one where durable materials, stable design, inconvenient location, evolving usefulness, and sheer luck all align. It is the exception that proves the rule, a testament to how fragile our grandest gestures truly are against the combined forces of nature, economics, and human ambition. The greatest threat a ruin now faces may not be the fall of an empire, but the subtle, global changes in the very air and water around it. For centuries, these structures weathered natural cycles, but the modern world has introduced new, accelerated forms of decay that challenge their ancient resilience. One of the most insidious is acid rain. Industrial emissions release sulfur and nitrogen oxides into the atmosphere, which mix with water vapor to form mild acids. When this rain falls, it does not gently wear away stone over centuries, it actively attacks it. The chemical reaction is particularly devastating to marble and limestone, the very materials chosen for their beauty and workability. The acid dissolves the calcium carbonate that binds the stone, turning crisp carvings into blurred, pitted surfaces and weakening the structural integrity of columns and facades. Monuments that withstood 1,000 monsoons are now being chemically eroded in mere decades. their detailed stories fading into illegibility before our eyes. Alongside this chemical assault, the physical landscape itself is becoming unstable. Climate change is intensifying weather patterns, leading to more frequent and severe flooding. An ancient temple built on a riverbank, its foundation secure for ages, might now face repeated, violent inundations that scour its base and deposit corrosive salts deep into its masonry. Each flood leaves behind moisture that fuels biological growth and salt crystallization, a process where salts expand as they dry, acting like miniature explosives inside the stone's pores. But perhaps the most visually dramatic threat comes from rising sea levels. Coastal ruins and low-lying archaeological sites, which have been safe for millennia, are now on the front lines. The Mediterranean is dotted with Roman ports and Phoenician settlements that are slowly being submerged. The slow creep of saltwater does not just cover these sites, it permeates them, causing irreversible damage to buried artifacts, weakening foundations, and increasing erosion from wave action. A temple that survived the collapse of its civilization could be lost to the rising tide within a single century, a timeline that feels startlingly immediate. Yet perhaps the most ironic new challenge comes from the very thing that now ensures their protection: human attention. Mass tourism, while providing essential funding for conservation, creates its own intense pressures. The vibration from thousands of footsteps each day can gradually destabilize ancient floors and foundations. The humidity from the breath of crowds packed into a sealed tomb can foster mold and cause priceless frescoes to blister and flake. The desire to touch a carved surface repeated by millions of hands wears it smooth. The infrastructure built to accommodate visitors, from roads to large cruise ships docking nearby, can alter water tables and local ecosystems, creating unforeseen stresses. The ruin now exists in a constant tension between access and preservation, loved to death by a global audience. This reframes the entire narrative of survival. It is no longer a passive process where a sturdy structure simply outlasts its builders. Survival today is an active, ongoing battle. It requires a new kind of vigilance, one that uses satellite monitoring to track coastal erosion, microclimate sensors inside tombs, and sophisticated engineering to mitigate the effects of a changing world. The silent stones that endured through the slow clock of geology now face a clock set by human industry and consumption, ticking at a pace they were never designed to withstand. Their continued existence asks a profound question of our own era. What are we willing to change to ensure these messengers from the past have a future? This modern battle for preservation forces us to confront a difficult choice. When we decide to save a ruin, what exactly are we saving? Is it the crumbling, evocative shell shaped by centuries of wind and rain, or is it the magnificent structure as its builders first envisioned it? This tension lies at the heart of heritage conservation today, a philosophical divide between preserving the authentic ruin and reconstructing the lost monument. Both are acts of love, yet they represent two fundamentally different ways of speaking to the past. One approach seeks to freeze time at a single, poignant moment, the point of discovery. It argues that the value of a site like the Roman Forum lies precisely in its state of decay. Every fallen column, every weed growing between the paving stones, tells a story not just of construction, but of abandonment, of nature's reclamation, and of the sheer weight of time. This is the aesthetic of the romantic ruin, a place that invites contemplation on transience itself. To clean it up, to rebuild it, would be to erase that profound narrative and replace it with a modern guess, a replica that lacks the soul of age. The ruin, in this view, is an honest document of history's long journey. The opposing impulse is driven by a powerful desire for wholeness. It asks, why should we only celebrate the end of the story? When we look at the Parthenon in Athens, we see a skeleton. Its brilliant white marble sculptures, the pediments and metopes that told the myths of Athena, are mostly gone, some lost to time, others housed in museums abroad. The structure itself is a scaffold of careful repairs. The urge to see it complete, to digitally or even physically restore its shattered majesty, is overwhelming. It is an attempt to bridge the gap between our world and the world of Pericles, to experience the awe that ancient Athenians felt. This drive for reconstruction is not just about aesthetics, it is about cultural identity and healing. After the near-total destruction of Warsaw's old town in World War II, the Polish people made an extraordinary decision. Using old paintings, architectural plans, and sheer collective memory, they meticulously rebuilt the historic center, brick by brick. This was not an attempt to create a fake. It was an act of defiance against erasure, a way to reclaim a stolen past and mend the national spirit. The rebuilt Warsaw is a testament to the idea that a monument's true form can be a living part of a community's present. Each approach is a different strategy for managing survival in the modern age. Preservation of the ruin accepts the passage of time as the final, authentic sculptor. It prioritizes the material truth of what has come down to us with all its scars. Reconstruction, however, seeks to reverse time's damage, to resurrect the original vision and make it functional once more, whether for education, tourism, or spiritual continuity. One treats the monument as a sacred relic of process, the other as a repairable heirloom of form. This debate has no easy answer because it asks what we value most in our dialogue with history: the melancholy beauty of loss or the inspiring power of restoration. In the end, both sides are trying to answer the same urgent plea from the stones: remember us. They just disagree on whether memory is best served by the whisper of the ruin or the clear voice of the monument reborn. A ruin is a message stripped down to its most essential elements. When we stand before one, we are not hearing the daily gossip of the ancient marketplace or the specific prayers to a forgotten god. Those intimate details, the living breath of the civilization, are the first things to vanish. The complex ideology that justified the pyramid, the political intrigues of the palace, the precise rituals of the temple, all of that context evaporates with the people who understood it. What remains is something more primal, a communication built from sheer mass and endurance. The first thing a ruin shouts across the centuries is raw, undistilled power. You look up at the cyclopean blocks of a Mycenaean fortress gate, and you do not need to know the king's name to feel the implicit threat and authority it projected. Its scale alone declares, we commanded resources and labor you can scarcely comprehend. We could shape the earth itself to our will, and you will obey. This is a statement that needs no translation. Alongside power, the ruin is a permanent resume of technological capability. The precise fitting of stones without mortar, the daring span of a Roman arch, the clever hydraulics of a Khmer moat, these are not just pretty features. They are solved problems. They tell any observer we understood mathematics, physics, and material science. We could organize not just people but knowledge into achieving the seemingly impossible. The structure itself is the proof of that intellect, standing long after the scrolls that explain the principles have turned to dust. Then there is aesthetic ambition, the undeniable drive to create beauty on a grand scale. The harmonious proportions of a Greek temple, even in ruins, speak of a society that valued order, balance, and a connection to an ideal. The intricate, endless carvings covering a Cambodian temple wall reveal a worldview where every surface was a canvas for story and cosmology. The ruin tells us these people did not just build to survive, they built to aspire, to reach for something sublime and make it tangible. This ambition is perhaps the most human signal they send. But beneath all of this lies the most profound communication of all, a testament to sheer collective human effort. Every stone in a pyramid represents the toil of thousands, the coordination of quarriers, engineers, boatmen, and laborers across decades. The ruin is the physical echo of that effort. It is the monument not to a single pharaoh, but to the anonymous multitude who hauled, carved, and lifted. Their names are lost, but their achievement is not. In this way, the ruin performs a final, ironic feat. It becomes a physical testament to organizational capacity that outlives the organization itself. The state, with all its laws, tax collectors, and administrators, dissolves into history, yet its greatest legacy is this stone evidence that it could, for a time, marshal human cooperation on a breathtaking scale. The bureaucracy is gone, but the pyramid remains. The empire faded, but the aqueduct still strides across the valley. They show us that humans, when united by a common vision or compelled by a powerful will, can alter the landscape for millennia. So the ruins' silent testimony is not about the specifics of who they were, but about the astounding things they could do. It asks us not to recite their history, but to witness their capability. In the end, a ruin speaks the universal language of ambition, effort, and the stubborn human desire to make a mark that the wind and the rain will not quickly erase. The silent stones have told their long story, from the first choice of granite over wood, to the patient work of roots and rain, to the modern hum of tourist crowds. We have traced the improbable journey of a monument outliving its makers. The survival of a ruin is never an accident. It is a fragile victory won by a rare alignment of factors. First, the deliberate shield of its birth, the durable materials and resilient engineering chosen by builders obsessed with eternity. Then, the strange protection of its abandonment, as geographic isolation or sheer impracticality made it more trouble than it was worth to destroy. Later, its rebirth through new meaning, whether as a church, a fortress, or a sacred site for a different faith. And finally, in our own era, its active preservation fueled by curiosity, science, and economics. A ruin is not a passive relic. It is an active participant, a stubborn fact on the landscape that forces every new generation to ask questions, tell stories, and redefine its own place in time. It shapes the physical world, becoming the foundation of a new town or the centerpiece of a national park. More powerfully, it shapes the imagination, offering a tangible connection to human ambition on a scale that transcends any single lifetime. So what of our own world with its towers of glass and spans of steel? Our monuments are different, but the fundamental urge is the same. We still build to impress, to commemorate, and to endure. The concrete in our dams and the reinforced steel in our skyscrapers are our statements to the future. Yet the same timeless rules will judge them. Their survival will depend on the quality of their bones, the stability of their ground, and the value, practical or symbolic, they hold for the people who come after us, people we cannot possibly imagine. Look around at the grand structures of our age. Which ones, do you think, are built with eternity in mind? And which of our silent, towering messages will still be standing 1,000 years from now, waiting patiently to tell a story no one living today remembers?